Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And with this one, I will be going over my Restoration Druid Patch 9.1 PvP guide. This is going to go over talents, conduits, legendaries, compositions, and some strategy with gameplay at the end of the video. So if you want to know basically everything there is to know about Restoration Druid so you can start having some success here in Patch 9.1, then this is the place to be. Quite a lot has changed. So I think that this information is very relevant and a nice little kind of catch up so you can get ready for 9.1, because 9.1 is a lot different than 9.0 and 9.0.5 in a lot of ways. There's a lot more damage, which means that there are different considerations you need to start making when you're switching over to the Restoration Druid. So just as a caveat, I think that Resto Druid is an extremely well-rounded healer. You can make it work in all PvP scenarios. You're going to be desirable in all PvP scenarios, and it's a flexible healer. So you're going to have comp options and strategy options, choosing between defensive play and offensive play. So if you're looking for a well-rounded healer, in my opinion, a well-designed healer and a very fun healer to play for a long time, then this is the healer that you're going to want to go for at the moment in patch 9.1. Does it come with its weaknesses? Yes, and we'll go over them as we get to them. So let's just get started. We'll take a look at the talents, and some talents are still kind of just auto lock in. You don't really have to think about it, but there are some other talents that you might not have considered before or might just totally write off that are actually a lot better now. So on the first row, the level 15 row, we have Abundance, we have Nourish, and Cenarian Ward. I am pretty much always running Cenarian Ward, and this is because of the legendary that I run, that pretty much all Restoration Druids run, which is the Verdant Infusion, which means that when you Swift Mend, you no longer consume a heal over time effect. Great bonus just not alone on that, but it will also extend all of your current heal over time effects by 10 seconds, and Cenarian Ward is included as a heal over time effect. So incredibly powerful synergies there for single target healing, and that's very important to heal through the amount of damage that's currently available in the game. Moving down to the level 25 row, I am now almost exclusively always running Wild Charge. This just provides you mobility. It provides you the ability to root targets when they try and escape, maybe root healers behind pillars. It's just very versatile. And the main reason that I no longer really decide to go for Renewal is because of Conduits that we have that provide us Frenzied Regeneration, automatically triggering at low health, filling the role of what I used to use Renewal as. And because of these Conduits, you're generally not a target outside of Mind Games. Mind Games is particularly powerful against you. Renewal is not going to help you out too much with that, but the versatility of Wild Charge to escape from melee attackers, to get aggressive, you're really not going to beat this spell. It's a super fun spell, very interesting to always consider your options. Are you going to jump up a Z-axis, root across to escape to a target, try and pin a target, jump to an ally? You're just left with this giant buffet on just one spell. In my opinion, this might even be the most fun spell Druid has, and it's going to be the most versatile. So you can pretty much always lock in Wild Charge, and there's really no consideration for Tiger Dash. It's just a much longer cooldown, and you already have Dash even without Tiger Dash. Although it's on a longer cooldown, it's not necessary. Moving down to the Affinity row, I'm pretty much never running Balance Affinity. I think the only time you may ever consider Balance Affinity is if you were somehow memeing as Nightfade Druid, and you were in Boomkin form and you wanted to Convoke, and maybe you're running the Convoke legendary. Maybe that's stretching it really far, but that would be kind of a meme usage for this. Other than that, I haven't been using it too much. Again, you could use it in matchups with enemy mages to use regrowth while in Moonkin form to avoid being polymorphed, but damage is so high that I don't even know if you're really going to have time to consider that. As in the past, in previous expansions like Battle for Azeroth, you could get away with kind of taking the global to go into Moonkin form and trying to heal, but I don't know if you're really going to have the time anymore. Feral Affinity can be very good in 2v2. I would generally only recommend this in 3v3 if you're running with double spellcaster, like high priority spellcasters like Destruction Warlocks and elemental shamans that generally tend to be the target. This will provide you the ability to add some extra stun lock to your team. If your team already has a lot of stuns, then this is generally not going to be too much use to you. And then Guardian Affinity can just be a really good default if you don't want to think too much. It's going to be decent in all situations, if not the best in a lot of them. It's going to provide you extra damage reduction, super important for when you get swapped to, and provide you Frenzied Regeneration baseline, and provide you Incapacitating Roar, which is really good for setting up crowd control or interrupting enemy attackers' crowd control, or just peeling for yourself when you're pinned in bear form. This is going to provide you a ton of versatility and just solid defense across the board. It's what I've pretty much been playing almost every game. But again, for Affinity, good for Spellcaster 3v3, 2v2. Boomkin Affinity, I think it's more of a meme, but if you are struggling in mage matchups and you're just getting polymorphed a lot, you could try Moonkin Form and spamming Regrowth to try and deal with avoiding being polyed, but the pace of the game is much faster. You may not be able to utilize that as much anymore. So Guardian Affinity is a great lock. Moving on to the level 35 row, you get a little bit of flexibility here on the level 35 row. You can play Mighty Bash in pretty much every matchup. It's just an amazing stun on a 1 minute cooldown. It got nerfed slightly, so now it's only 4-second duration, but the ability to do bash into Cyclone is always going to be a great chain. Or if an enemy is chasing you behind the pillar, you can bash them behind the pillar, root them behind the pillar. It's great for setting up crowd control, or you want to coordinate with this with your teammates. So if your teammates have a stun, you want to use your Mighty Bash when they use their stun on 2 different targets to prevent each target from moving. That's going to be excellent lockdown and a great reason to bring a Druid. Now, another option is Mass Entanglement. And this is very good at the moment into Windwalker monks if they're still running Storm, Earth, and Fire after the readjustment to their Storm, Earth, and Fire. But even without Storm, Earth, and Fire, having Mass Entanglement for their Zwen, the Tiger. So you're going to use this obviously as a root. So it's good into melee cleaves, double melee, and it's good into classes that have pets because you'll root the melee and you'll root all of the pets. So Beast Mastery Hunter is prevalent at the moment. So if the hunters pop Beast of Wrath, you can root their pets. And now they're doing a significantly less amount of damage overall. You can root a Windwalker's pets when they're summoned. And particularly at the moment, you're going to see a lot of Restoration Shamans and you're going to see a lot of Rock Elementals. And you're going to be thinking, what is going on? Why is this damage so high right now? There's just this Earth Elemental out. But the Earth Elemental does as much damage as a Demon Hunter. And Demon Hunters do a lot of damage. So using Mass Entanglement to root the Earth Elemental can be a great tool. So think of this against double melee DPS when your team already has enough stuns. So maybe you've got a Warrior on your team, a Rogue on your team, a Demon Hunter on your team. Bash might not be exactly necessary. And Mass Entanglement might be a better option for you. And it's really good at removing those pets from the game. And because it's instant cast, you don't need to worry about being interrupted on it. And you can get it going out immediately. Heart of the Wild, I'm pretty much never really taking into consideration as an option. Maybe if you wanted to do some all-in Feral Affinity cheese, or you really wanted to go all in on that Boomkin Affinity, Heart of the Wild, Convoke the Spirits, Resto Druid. I mean, I'm really pushing the meme limit right now to try and give you an option with this, but the fact that it's a 5-minute cooldown, it makes it pretty tough to utilize, especially considering the bonuses of the other 2 options that are competing with it. Moving into the level 40 row, Soul of the Forest is a great default one if you don't want to think about it too much. This basically means that after you've Swift Mended, your next heal is going to be increased significantly. Often this is what you're going to pair up with your Nature Swiftness. So you're going to Rejuve, you're going to Swift Mend, and then you're going to Nature Swiftness Regrowth. And you can see 31,000 with no heal over time effects, which is basically my entire health bar. That's going to be your emergency recovery heal, and that's where this has great synergy. You can use it with a Rejuve if you've got a hybrid on your team that's constantly topping the targets, so you can kind of bolster them up with some heal over time effects. That's going to be a great option as well. And now for me personally, I have been running Incarnation Tree of Life a little bit more in 3v3. In 2v2, not so much. But in 3v3, your games are going to be a lot shorter, and you get maximum value of this. If you really think about it, if a game ends before Tree of Life ends, you got way more value out of the Incarnation Tree of Life than you may have first considered. And this is one of the talents that I was talking about, where Tree of Life, no one's going to play that. Why would you ever play Tree of Life? But I think against things like the Earth Elemental Totem that Resto Shamans are running, especially Resto Shaman teams with Cleaves or Shadow Priests that zerg you, they just run on top of you and they drop everything that they've got and they try and kill you really fast. This will get you through those teams better than your other options, because when you're in Tree of Life, you're going to be able to cast Regrowth instantly. You'll get extra armor. You won't need to worry about being polymorphed. You're going to be a lot more durable and get extra healing. And it's going to provide you more of emergency recovery. You can synergize Innervate with it to make all of these instant cast regrowths free. And you can also utilize instant entangling roots. So if you didn't want to run mass entanglement, you felt Bash was still necessary during the Tree of Life, you can use instant entangling roots to pin the earth elementals that are running at you, or the Zwen the tigers that are running at you to survive. This is also going to be very friendly to you if you're a new restoration druid or you're really struggling with these games ending too fast. Take this talent and almost just use it immediately when you see these big cooldowns like the earth elementals, the Colossus Smash, and just spam your way through the game. You're going to have way more healing per second than almost any other healer in the game. Maybe not a Mistweaver free casting, but this will get you through those all-ins, especially as Shamans have, and that's going to be one of your major weaknesses. So definitely consider it, or at least give it a try. I wouldn't completely write it off. At level 45 row, Overgrowth has just got so much value. Being able to, this used to be an honor talent, now it's the normal talent, and it's just going to allow you to apply all of your heal over time effects to a target. With how prevalent purges are at the moment between Shadow Priests and Shamans, removing all of your heal over time effects, and swaps being very powerful. So one target's being attacked, and then they switch to another. You got to Overgrowth to kind of anticipate their swap. Again, synergizes excellently with Innervate. I always recommend Innervate Overgrowth to get the full value of this, reducing its cost to free. Spring Blossoms can be all right if you're running with Destruction Warlock or something that's stationary and doesn't move around too much to get some extra bonus healing. But with how high damage is and how easy it is to swap, you may even often just use this on a target that you're already currently healing to get the extra wild growth on the target to try and get as much mastery as possible to heal the target as much as you can. That I wouldn't really consider anything else on this row for PvP at the moment. And then moving down to the level 50 row, a good default lock-in is going to be Germination. It's going to just allow you to apply Rejuvenation twice to the same target, providing you an increased amount of mastery healing. I have seen some druids experimenting with Flourish, and this way you'd be able to extend all of your heal over time effects by another 100%. So if you had your Adaptive Swarm and your Cenarian Ward, and you had all of your heal over time effects up, you'd be able to extend them, and then you'd be able to Flourish and extend them again. This can be very effective when you know a team is only going to attack one target. So if you want to experiment with this, you can, but with a 1.5 minute cooldown, I see more value coming out of Germination. And if you're running against a team that is really going to be purging a lot or just focusing down single targets, you can also run Photosynthesis to try and get some extra Life Bloom healing, because you're just always going to be spamming Life Bloom on them. But this will always kind of be a good default one if you don't really want to worry about it. And I like, for me, for example, I see myself playing Germination all the way to what I'm hoping is going to be another rank 1 title as Restoration Druid, but I may experiment with these ones and let you know more. But these ones are a bit more experimental. Germination is generally the standard pick. Now for honor talents, you're going to have a little bit more of an interesting decision with your honor talents, because so many of them are actually very good now. One of the first ones to consider is Disentanglement. This is Efflorescence will now remove snare effects. So when you put your Wild Mushroom down or your Efflorescence, then you will remove snares. The main reason that this is important is against Frost Death Knights. They got an honor talent, so when Chains of Ice is on the target, it's going to remove a lot of haste from the target that's got Chains of Ice. But you can use this to remove Chains of Ice and remove the haste reduction. So this is going to be really good. A lot of casters are going to love you. You definitely want to know that. So against Frost Death Knight even in particular, this can be very good. It can be mana intensive. So generally, maybe if you're only healing caster DPS, so like a Shadow Priest, you put this below them and they can stay in it and not worry about losing all their haste all the time. But if you want to be really aggressive and get your melee DPS out of Chains of Ice so they can stay on target, this is going to be helpful to you to run this. Entangling Bark, this can be excellent in 2v2 when you're fighting warriors and rogues and melee DPS, and just gives you an instant root. And generally speaking at the moment, the defensive bonus of Iron Bark, so the damage reduction, you might not really even feel like it's there. You might press Iron Bark and be like, hey, you still died. That was really hard. So running Entangling Bark with that against melee DPS just prevents the melee from hitting you entirely. 0% damage taken. That's a pretty good bonus, especially in 2v2 where dampening is very high, and some of these other talents that give you healing per second can make it quite difficult. So against melee DPS, give Entangling Bark a try. I'd say it's more valuable in 2v2 than 3v3. But if you're really out of options, you could give it a go in 3v3. And now Thorns. This is the classic. Every warrior hates to see Thorns. You just activate this on the target, and it's going to redirect damage back to melee attackers. And they're also going to be slowed a bit. This is very good in 2s. In 3s, you kind of want to coordinate this with your team a little bit because healing is so high. If you just kind of activate this willy-nilly, the enemy team will recover through it quite easily. You got to think of this as kind of a synergy with your DPS's cooldowns. So when they're get popping off with cooldowns like Doom Winds or something, or Colossus Smash, you can activate this on a target. You can also use it as a deterrent and not even think of it as offense. So you might have a target that doesn't have a defensive cooldown, right? They don't have Die by the Sword. So you don't want them to attack that target. You can put Thorns on that target, and they're like, I don't really want to hit Thorns. And then they're not hitting the target that you all along just didn't want them to hit. So you can think of this as throughput, or you can think of it as a trap to try and prevent enemies from attacking a target, or you can try and get them to attack your fully hotted target. That's another great tactic. So if one target doesn't have hots, you put Thorns on it. Oh, now we're hitting the fully hotted target. I'm happy. So this has a lot of value into melee DPS, and it's often a debate between Entangling Bark and Thorns. So this one can be a lot of fun, high skill cap. Now, Deep Roots, this is really good if you're running that Mass Entanglement talent. This is really good if you're running double Spellcaster. So you can just root targets fully dotted, or maybe even blast them a little bit. It can be a lot of fun in those Spellcaster compositions. But with melee DPS, it can tend to backfire. It can have good synergies if you're running the Tree of Life build to run with the Deep Roots. So that way you can instantly root and tree, and maybe enemy attackers are trying to escape, but they can't because now they're rooted and the root's taking a long time to break. So this can also be a great option. And you can already see, like, I'm scrolling through the honor talents. They've almost all had somewhat of a place. And then our new honor talent, High Winds, which is now Cyclone leaves the target reeling, reducing their damage and healing by 30%. Excellent into hybrid DPS, so Ret Paladins, Feral Druids, anything that can heal, and even enemy healers. But I would say you usually want at least a hybrid and a healer on the other team if you're going to run this. And so if you Cyclone a Ret Paladin at low health, for example, they'll come out of the Cyclone, and before they might have just completely healed themselves to full. If you're running this honor talent, their Word of Glory might not get them to full, maybe 80%, but it'll still be less than going back to full, at least I would hope. But yeah, you're thinking of this against hybrids, and usually targets want to use their biggest heal right when they come out of crowd control. So this is a nice trap to put them in. So right when they're coming out of the Cyclone, they're healing. When they want to press their biggest heal, it's going to be reduced by the most. So this is a great tactic into hybrid DPS and healers so that they don't have immediate recovery. Early Spring is just instant wild growth. This is really just an RBG talent. I don't think that it was working for a really long time. I honestly haven't tested it in RBGs to make sure that it was working. It was supposed to apply Life Bloom, I think, to your target. So it wasn't doing that. So I kind of just write it off. I wasn't really looking at it anymore. Master Shapeshifter. You're really not taking this anymore. They nerfed the Feral Affinity portion to only be bleed damage and not just all damage. You really only took this as Feral Affinity 2v2, but now you don't take it ever. It's just, again, maybe, look at, they buffed the Boomkin one, though. At the end of Boomkin form, the cast out of Wrath Starfire is reduced by 30%, and their damage is buffed by 20%. There's some meme build in here, man. There's some Heart of the Wild, Boomkin, Night Fae. Someone there was just like, it's a thing. And whoever is brave and strong enough to try it, it's a thing. But I don't think it's a thing. If you want to try and make it a thing, go ahead. This will be it. All right. Now Mark of the Wild. This is really good into fire mages, elemental shamans, assassination rogues. Usually whenever I see any of those specializations on a team, I'm running Mark of the Wild to provide me some extra damage reductions to their poisons or to their dots. Because they're heavily focused around their dot damage. So this is a great pickup into those classes. And now Keeper of the Grove, which is a completely new honor talent, which is just buffing the healing of tranquility, but also making it uninterrupted. So if your melee DPS are getting zerged down and you've got no other option, you need an emergency heal, this is a great way for recovery. I've been playing this often into Rogue Mage. So into Rogue Mage, for example, I might run Keeper of the Grove, Mark of the Wild to reduce fire mage damage, and then Focused Growth. Focused Growth is kind of just a default pick. Did I skip over Focused Growth? Did I somehow skip over focused growth? This is pretty much always auto lock in. You're always going to have focused growth. It just lets life bloom stack 3 times, reduces its mana cost, and increases its healing. This is providing kind of the old school gameplay of Restoration Druid that's super fun, trying to maintain your life bloom stacks, trying to predict attacks, and get the maximum amount of healing out of it. I really like the gameplay of this, which unfortunately is why it's kind of just becomes the default pick. You've always got to take it. But Keeper of the Grove, Mark of the Wilds, like these sets of honor talents into Rogue Mage can be very effective so that you don't need to deal with Counterspell if you need an emergency heal to go through Smoke Bomb or something. But you're generally using Tranquility behind a pillar anyways. You're generally using Tranquility as just an extra heal over time buffer. But against Rogue Mage, I enjoy running this, so I don't need to worry about being Counterspelled. And then I think that's it for honor talents. So you can see we got a ton of flexibility. A lot of these talents are very good. And I can just maybe run you through some examples. So against a Ret Paladin, for example, I might run High Winds. Somehow we've missed Reactive Resin as well. Reactive Resin, this is just a good throughput. It's going to provide you a lot of healing. So let's say we fight Ret Warrior. Ret Warrior is very common. High Winds to help out with reducing the Ret Paladin's healing. Once they're cycloned, they come out, and reducing their damage during their Avenging Wrath. So it's very important you're cycloning them to reduce all of that bonus that they're getting. Reactive Resin to just provide you extra healing onto the target with rejuvenation, and then focus growth for extra healing. This is always mandatory, always baseline. This way you're playing into buffering up your healing a lot. You're playing into reducing their damage cooldowns and their healing output, and then you just need this for default gameplay. And this can be a very good kind of almost just default talent build. If you really wanted like a cookie cutter talent build, I'm just looking at this and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And you could just flip out this. Oh, there's a Fire Mage. All right, Mark of the Wild. Oh, it's double melee DPS. I don't need a lot of healing. I want to have Thorns as a trap. This can be a great pick as well. Maybe there's no hybrids. Maybe it's just Warrior and something, or a Hunter. I could run this for extra healing on myself and not need the bonus of this. But 30% less damage is still quite a lot. And a lot of DPS are also eager to press their cooldowns when they come out of crowd control. So this can be a great pickup as well. But other than that, that's going to be it for talents. Now when we jump into conduits, Plague, Deviser, Marilith is pretty much always what you're going to be running, and you're going to want to be Necro Lord. And the main reasons for this are going to be the ultimate form, so immunity to crowd control when you're casting Fleshcraft, and the frictionless coating, which is an extra shield, which got nerfed in PvP, but it's still very good. Any sort of automatic healing is going to be amazing. And thankfully, we have a pretty cookie cutter build when it comes to conduits. You're not going to really have to think about this too much. Floral recycling, you're going to want increased Swiftman healing. You need emergency instant healing right now with how high damage is. Well-honed instincts. This is the automatic frenzied regeneration when you dip on low health. Again, you're going to need this. This one doesn't matter. Pick whichever one you want. Then you're going to want evolved swarm. This is going to be extra healing provided from your adaptive swarm. And when you use your legendary to increase its duration, then you're going to get a ton of healing output. You want this one. Innate resolve, regrowth, and frenzied regeneration healing is increased by 16.8% of yourself. These synergize very well. Free frenzied regen that gets buffed. Free regrowth when you're getting healed behind the pillar is going to be a great recovery, so you don't spend too much time topping yourself off when you escape enemy attackers. We already went over ultimate form. You can utilize this to immune crowd control while you're fleshcrafting. So bait somebody to interrupt you on a cyclone and then start channeling fleshcraft to immune their stun and get a huge shield. Great to have 2 schools of magic as a healer as well. Utilizing this as an emergency heal is a great idea. This one is where you get a little bit of debate. I have opted to go for Flash of Clarity, which is clear class regrowth heal for an additional 28%. So whenever your life bloom ticks, you have a chance to just get a free regrowth, then its healing is going to be buffed. And I've been spamming regrowth a lot to try and recover. I would recommend if you're healing Shadow Priest, for example, that you run this. But if you're healing hybrids like Rets and enhancements, then you can run the Ready for Anything, which is Nature Swiftness cooldown has been reduced. And you're always relying on this as an emergency heal, which has then got me into the debate of which one is actually better because if I'm only using this when it's an absolute emergency, it doesn't really matter how fast it comes back up unless I needed it in an emergency that fast, which is not often the case. Most cooldowns are around a minute all the time. So you do get it when you would absolutely need it again anyways. So you were kind of just losing out on the extra couple of seconds of value. It's not like NS is something that you're just, whoa, I got to get this thing out there as soon as possible. It's more like, I need this for absolute last minute. So this just gives you throughput at all times, which is what I really liked. This one here, undulating maneuvers, while you're above 80% health, 5% of it will be converted into a dot. over 5 seconds. This one's not really amazing. Actually, later on, I would recommend going Viscous Trail. So when you're struck by a snare, you drop a puddle that slows enemy attackers by 70%, which is a nice bonus. But the main reason I think you're going to go after Viscous Trail is to get another Endurance Conduit when you get higher into your levels. And I'd recommend going for Ursine Vigor. This is going to just provide you extra health when you go into Bear. So if you shift into Bear, pre-shift a stun, extra armor, extra health. That's going to provide you a ton of bonuses, synergize effectively with your Frenzied Regeneration and all of the other Endurance Conduits. So I think the Endurance Conduit's going to outweigh the Finesse Conduit and this minor amount of reduction. But before we get there, this one can be decent just for a little bit of throughput. But the Endurance Conduit's going to be important, synergizing all of these Frenzied Regen Bear ones. And then the final one, Kevin's Oozling. Adaptive Swarm summons Kevin's Oozling to fight alongside you for 8 seconds as attacks damage your enemies to take 6% additional damage from you. So if your Adaptive Swarm's on a target, you get a little bit more of a damage bonus. And then you just heal your allies for this. You don't really have to think about it. It's going to be doing stuff on its own, a little bit of extra damage, a little bit of extra healing. And it's going to be pretty much your cookie cutter conduit build. So we've gone over talents, we've gone over conduits, we've gone over the legendary. Again, Verdant Infusion is pretty much always exclusively what you're going to be running, unless you were doing some sort of Convoke the Spirits weird meme thing as Night Fae with all of these other random boomkin buffing resto stuff. But it's more or less kind of a meme in my opinion. If you were going to drop Verdant Infusion, the only other one I would consider is the Dark Titan's Lesson, where Life Bloom can be on 2 targets against heavy purge teams. But I think the damage is too high to give up the bonus of extending your Cenarian Ward and extending your Adaptive Swarm to really drop anything else at the moment in PvP. For myself personally, I'm running Haste and Versatility. It's perfectly fine to mix in some Mastery while you're gearing up, right? Because you might not get all of the pieces of the slots that you want to get. So chucking in Mastery Verse on a piece is not going to be the end of the world. I'd say that Crit Verse is going to be your worst option when you're picking amongst all of your PvP gear. You just don't want to go after that. But Versatility is definitely mandatory with the bonuses on the trinkets and how high you can get your versatility up to. It's going to provide you damage reduction. It's going to provide you increased healing and some extra damage. It's just an incredibly valuable stat in PvP. So as far as stats, that's all we got to talk about. Just making sure that we've talked about everything here. I feel like we've been talking for a while. We've gone over our talents, honor talents, conduits, and legendaries. Now let's talk about a little bit of gameplay. So I've got a VOD up here that I'm going to play for you. And in this VOD, you can see we're fighting a hybrid DPS. So I picked High Winds, I picked Thorns, and then we picked the Life Bloom honor talent. This way I can kind of redirect the enemy attackers away with Thorns. And I do expect them to tunnel one target, being the Shadow Priest, to try and prevent their attacks. So right now, Rep Paladin is very common. Feral Druid is very common. Discipline Priest, not so common. But you will see these other classes a lot, and you really need to respect their cooldowns. They hit incredibly hard. In this video, I'm playing with a Shadow Priest and I'm playing with a Warrior. This is a great beginner comp for a Resto Druid. It's very durable, pretty straightforward. So I would recommend this as kind of a Resto Druid comp at the moment. At the beginning of the game, my Warrior is likely to charge in, so I hot up my Warrior, get 2 rejuves up, and I just go into stealth. I'm waiting to figure out who they're actually going to go after. Is it Warrior? Is it Shadow Priest? And then I'm going to commit my Life Bloom. Here, the enemy Feral has popped Berserk, so I use that incapacitating Roar from the Guardian affinity, and I use Ursul's Vortex. Now this Ret has Seraphim. That's big damage, so I want to Cyclone them. Why? Because High Winds is going to reduce their damage when they come out of the Cyclone and reduce their healing. Here I've got Life Bloom on my Warrior, so I Thorns my Shadow Priest. This way, if they're attacking into the Thorns or they're attacking into my Adaptive Swarm, either way I've got a lot of output on that target, and I can deter their attacks by quite a large margin. So splitting your resources is a good idea. I used Innervate Overgrowth, standard play that you always want to be looking for. And then just get a rejuve on yourself to top yourself off over time. Probably wasn't even necessary to do 2 rejuves here onto myself. And then here, my Shadow Priest is playing Surrender to Madness, so he took a massive hit of damage. I panicked and Iron Barked. So if you're playing with a Shadow Priest and they're running that talent, or they get access to Surrender to Madness, they should tell you when they're about to take a lot of damage so you don't accidentally overextend your cooldowns to that target. And here I used High Winds to Cyclone the Feral. Against these hybrids, you do want to be looking for Cyclones because this team only has 1 ranged interrupt. I can also punish them quite heavily. And even diminishing returned Cyclones will get value because when they come out of it, their healing and their damage will be reduced. Here I use Cyclone and Bash as crowd control. I'm trying to remove the Feral from the game as much as possible. The Feral is basically a healer, so I'll use Incapacitating Roar. And when you are fighting hybrids, especially that are playing with Discipline Priest doesn't have really great emergency recovery heals, so crowd controlling them can often be more important than actually crowd controlling the priest if you want to prevent them from fully recovering. Now in this position, they're going after my warrior. They have that Seraphim icon active, this yellow icon here next to the Ret Paladin. So I've got my Cenarian Ward, Adaptive Swarm, and then I Swift Mend. That extends all of those heal over time effects, and it'll give me Soul of the Forest, so I can go for a regrowth. And it's going to be a very big regrowth with the Soul of the Forest bonus. And here we see the Gladiator's Maledict. It's coming back in a new unchained form. You're gonna want to interrupt the channel. So the Maledict will channel. You want to stop the channel, then dispel it, or if it's not that much of an absorb, then just heal through it. Here the Ret Paladin runs at me. I use Fleshcraft. This immunes the Hammer of Justice. So paying attention to melee attackers, how close are they getting to you? What do you want to deal with it? You can either use a defensive cooldown, Fleshcraft immunity. Those are your two options. Then after I immune their Hodge, I Cyclone them to try and reduce their damage. Here, the Ret Paladin procs Avenging Wrath. I see Dark Archangel, so I've decided to use my Trinket. And I had to use Swift Mend just as an emergency heal to try and heal through this burst damage. So you want to be balancing somewhere between greed as well as emergency recovery. Now with Soul of the Forest, Nature Swiftness, that warrior's back up to full health immediately. That's your last resort heal. So that felt like a very panicked moment. I was getting crowd controlled. I didn't want to anymore. So I just tossed out the Soul of the Forest, Nature Swiftness to recover the warrior back to full health. Now in this position, my Shadow Priest has a lot of options, right? And Dispersion, Fade, tons of options. So my Shadow Priest shouldn't be my main focus target in terms of what I'm worried about being attacked next. It should be my warrior who just used their Intimidating Shout and their Die by the Sword. They're limited here. And I have an add-on video on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out to get these add-ons. So my Life Plum needs to be on the warrior. My Adaptive Storm needs to be on the warrior because they don't have any options. So all of my healing, all of my resources go into the target that has limited defense. And then when I'm in a stun, I tell my team, my warrior Blade Storms to immune being stunned, a great play on his part. Then when I come out, I can Iron Bark. Here the Surrender to Madness happens, and I think my Shadow Priest probably can Greater Fade before it hits, rather than just losing 80% of their health. But you might be wondering, what just happened to the Shadow Priest there? It's actually the Shadow Priest hitting themselves. Masochist, Shadow Priest, I don't know. But after that huge hit of damage, the Shadow Priest has a choice to either Greater Fade it or tell you that it's happening, so that you can heal through it. And a lot of Shadow Priests are running that, so you do want to build some communication with them. And here I'm still just focusing Adaptive Swarm, and I'll use Thorns when the target is stunned to try and either just prevent them from attacking into a stun, because that's generally when people want to attack the most, or if they do, they're going to take a lot of collateral damage as a result. You can see the main purpose of our comp is to rotate defensive cooldowns, stay alive, and run enemy teams out of mana. Their Discipline Priest is now almost out of mana. We're getting much more aggressive. I push in, I bash the Feral when the Priest is in a Stormbolt, coordinating the stuns, and then cycloning out of the stun. This is a great setup example. Now I'm using Innervate and Overgrowth. Again, really good synergies. You can use Tranquility during this time as well to try and get an extra tick for Mastery, and because it's free with Innervate. I don't in this situation, but it is a good idea to try to in this position. Here the Feral Druid's using Berserk. That's a big cooldown, so my warrior is trying to kite away. I'm using Cenarian Ward, Adaptive Swarm. Here I see the Ret Paladin running at me. I could have tried to Fleshcraft this. I get Mass Dispelled anyways, so whenever you're in Magic Crowd Control, tell your priest to help you out a little bit with the Mass Dispel. But this is now Dark Archangel, so my warrior has decided to use Die by the Sword, and I am in a Cyclone. I think we might not have been playing in voice for this game too, as well, so sometimes things aren't exactly the most perfect, but in that situation, whenever I'm crowd controlled, that's immediately when my team needs to start thinking, what are we going to use? Because if the healer can't heal, we might die. This is likely the time that we're going to die the most. So we really need to take into consideration our options. I'm still looking for Cyclones when I can, not even just to stop them from attacking, but to get that extra bonus of reducing their healing when they try and recover when they come out of the Cyclones, and reducing their damage during their burst cooldowns. Here I pre-Iron Bark the warrior because I saw the Feral jump at me. When the Feral jumps at me, the Feral wants to stun me, wants to do something. So I'm going to toss defensive cooldowns. And then with the Feral next to me, I bash, and somehow we bash each other at the same time. I've really never honestly seen this happen before, but I would have liked to have bashed and then cycloned. And you often want to wait for the diminished return. But now they've been attacking me a bit, so I'm going to use Fleshcraft preemptively to get a shield. So if they are going to make a swap to me, then I'm less likely to die. So this is the other way to think about Fleshcraft. Now Seraphim comes out, Avenging Wrath comes out, Power Infusion comes out. We cycle on that Paladin. We got to get this thing out of here. This thing is going to hit really hard. If you've seen Ret Paladins with warriors, they are going to snap kill anything when these cooldowns are popped. And you can see my warrior, he's out of there. There's no more, no more Ret business. We don't want this. CC the Ret, get away from the Ret, get the Ret out of the game as soon as possible when you see those cooldowns up. because you're going to regret it otherwise. It's going to be a really bad time. And now in this position, the priest is still out of mana, so I've just got to get my warrior as hotted up as possible so that my warrior can just go to town, stay aggressive, and not worry about backing down. And then my goal outside of that is to crowd control the ret and crowd control the feral to stop them from supporting the priest while my team goes after the enemy priest. But I'm actually out of mana, so I decided to just drop combat, sit, and then go into stealth. You can stealth and drink, but they go after my warrior in a stun, so I just come back and use Nature's Swiftness. And I didn't use it with the Soul of the Forest because dampening has kicked in. My warrior's very low. This is becoming a more stressful situation. This is a nice part of picking up Bash, is if you're interrupted, you can bash the target to stop them from cloning you or doing anything to you. It's a nice little emergency when you get interrupted. And now in this position, because they're all stacked up, I've used my medallion. We get a double fear on the feral and the ret. They can't heal. We stun the priest. This is an example of a perfect setup. Then I use wild charge to root the ret paladin in the room out of line of sight of the priest for a moment, just trying to buy as much time as I can for my team to stay aggressive. But even with that setup, they were actually still able to recover. So I start going after the feral druid a little bit. I'm thinking about crowd controlling the feral, stopping the feral from getting back to the target, but with dampening so high, the priest out of mana, everybody getting cut down by the amount of damage Shadow Priest and Warrior has, we're able to kind of just close out the game and clean it up. And because they went after the Warrior so much, they left the Shadow Priest open to do whatever they wanted. Again, this is a composition that I would definitely recommend to anybody. At the moment for Resto Druid, it's a great option, but you're flexible. You can play double caster, you can play double melee. Maybe Rogue Mage is not going to be your forte. Generally, Holy Priest is kind of taking you over in that regard, but everything else, you're going to be able to slot yourself in. Damage is a lot higher. You really want to overheal right now. Just spam regrowth even if the target's at full health, anticipating some damage. Use cooldowns when enemies use cooldowns. That's gonna, if you're not doing that, you're not going to win. Just flat out period. You need to get these add-ons so you can see the cooldowns, activate your cooldowns when you see them. Otherwise, you are going to get absolutely flattened. But other than that, I hope that this video was helpful to you. My 9.1 Restoration Druid guide. If it was, please leave it with a thumbs up. Comment down below with what you've got for ideas for Resto Druid, if I missed anything, or if you think I'm totally off base. I want this to be a good resource for everybody. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. Just lets you know when my videos go live. If you want to watch me on twitch.tv/Supatease to watch me play live, then you can follow me there. I'm doing my best to stream every day. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.